Okay, we are at Bound to Be Read Books today, and we have author Jessica Handler here with her memoir, Invisible Sisters, and we're going to ask her briefly, what is Invisible Sisters about?
Invisible Sisters is my memoir about growing up in Atlanta in the 1960s and 70s and being the oldest of three sisters. And by the time I was 32, the only one living. My sister Susie, who was 8 when I was 10, died of leukemia, and our younger sister Sarah, who at that time was 4, was born with a very rare blood disorder called Costman's syndrome. She wasn't expected to live past elementary school, but she lived until she was 27. And Sarah was the one who told me that I would be the only one left. This is a story about growing up in a family that tried to save others and tried to save ourselves, and ultimately how I learned to remake myself and honor my family and myself after their deaths.
Jessica, who would be a good reader to think of for this book? I mean, who would be a good person to buy the book for?
This is a terrific book for anyone it has a very strong connection with women and girls, very much, because it's about the lives of women and girls, but it's also true for anyone who has experienced loss, and unfortunately that's very common. I found that a lot of book events that I've done, that people have come up to me afterwards and almost as if they're confiding in me said, you know, I'm an only one left too. So I think anyone who's struggling with loss or identity would enjoy this book, because there's also a great deal of love and laughter in Invisible Sisters.
What has the response been like for the book so far?
It's been very, very positive. I didn't tell you this. I got a fan letter from an 8th grader the other day who had to write a report on the book. And I'd like to know what she said, but she loved it. The response critically has been terrific. Atlanta Magazine compared it to Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking. The Jewish Daily Forward has reviewed it. It's been reviewed nationally very, very positively. And this summer was number 3 on a couple of booksellers' lists. So it's been doing very, very well.
Excellent. And what are you working on now? What's your next project?
I am working on a historical novel, also about women and girls, teenage girls in power, that takes place in Georgia just after the Civil War. And that's all I can say right now because I don't want to jinx it.
Okay. And what would you say is the biggest misconception that people might have about Invisible Sisters, just looking at the cover or hearing what the subject matter is?
Good question. This is in places a very sad book, but overall this book is fun, it is entertaining, it looks back on my life with my sisters and a certain time in Atlanta and in all of our teenage and young adult years with a lot of love, and there's a lot of pop culture references and real life in here.
And what's it like to, the differences as far as reading the book, as far as reading as a Jewish reader and reading as, well, a non-Jewish reader?
It's a good question. I have been doing a number of Jewish book events with this book. This book, although my family was Jewish and is Jewish, and we were raised, my sisters and I, with the premise of tikkun olam, which is to repair the world. I think all traditions, religious or not, grow up believing that we should care for one another, we should care for ourselves, and we should care for our world. So yes, this is a Jewish family, and yes, there's a little bit of Yiddish in here, a little bit of Yiddish swearing. That was my dad, the Yiddish swearing. But this is not exclusively a Jewish book or a Christian book or even a women's book. This is a book about taking care of ourselves and our world and our families.
And I noticed that when I read the book, there were a lot of references to different time periods, like the Civil Rights Movement, the 70s, the 80s, and it was interesting getting your perspective as you grew up from, you know, a child during the 60s through adulthood into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the pop culture references, and looking back through what were the hit songs in the 60s and 70s, or what kind of a public event took place, because I grew up in the Civil Rights Movement here in Atlanta and did spend a fair amount of time with my father on marches at public events, and growing up socially very aware. So it was a real pleasure for me in a way to bring that through. That's part of my memory and maybe new to some younger readers, or maybe just in terms of pop culture references, forgotten by other people. Every time I read that last page of the book, I get a big laugh from anybody who listened to the radio in, I don't know, 1974.
And we're not going to tell you what that is. You'll just have to
You'll
buy
have-
the book
yeah.
and read it. All right, well, thank you. It's Jessica Handler, author of Invisible Sisters.
Thank
Down
you.
to the Red Books.
Thank you.